It's 7:06. It's O'Connor and Company here on this President's Day Monday. I'm Larry O'Connor, filling out a jockstrap better than Kristen Stewart on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine.
Wow.
Did you see that picture of her on Rolling Stone?
Oh, I did.
What's that all about? What's wrong with people? People just settle down, right?
Yes, absolutely.
She said she's going to want to do like the gayest, queerest movie ever. But our friend Derek Hunter pointed out she already did Twilight.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, where can you go from there?
Yeah, she's sort of done it.
Happy President's Day, everybody. Coming up at, I'm a little under the weather. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I was last week.
You were. You were a little
yeah,
dopey.
Yeah.
Now I'm a little grumpy.
You are a little grumpy.
But we're here to get you happy.
I'm trying to avoid eye contact.
Don't be bashful. I need a doc. 7:35, we'll talk to Jane Hampton Cook, presidential historian, and then at 8:05, Zach Smith of the Heritage Foundation. I'm Larry Connor with Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Joe diGenova is with us, legal analyst, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. All right, let's start with the hi, Joe. Happy President's Day.
And same to you all.
This ruling in New York, it's obviously going to be overturned. This is outrageous. It's ridiculous. There's no way it can stand, right?
Well, we hope so. That would be the logical result of what really is an unhinged judge sitting in an unhinged case in an unhinged state with an unhinged governor. You name it, everything in New York is unhinged. I noticed that Kathy Hochul, the governor, wanted to assure everybody yesterday by telling them that, don't worry, this was only for people like Trump. In other words, it was a selective prosecution. The governor may just have made herself a witness in a federal lawsuit eventually that will be filed to set this aside if the state of New York doesn't set it aside through its judicial system. We shall see. The appellate division that this case goes to next is 100% Democratic appointed. The Court of Appeals, which is the ultimate court in New York, they do not have a Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, oddly enough, and really oddly enough, is their trial court. The Court of Appeals may see things better. This case has everything that could possibly be wrong with it. A statute that's never been used before, an abusive judge, strange political relationships in the courtroom. I think that New York is killing itself. This is suicide by litigation. So we shall see what happens in New York. I don't think Kathy Hochul's assurance was very assuring.
But meantime, an appeal for Donald Trump or getting this overturned is certainly important for him and his company. But as far as we the people,
goodness, yes.
But as far as we the people are concerned, as far as citizens are concerned, as far as the election is concerned, which is what this really is all about, that appeals process could happen after the election. But it affects the election. The whole purpose of this is to have this headline affect the election and to harm the man running for president against Joe Biden.
Well, of course it is. All of this litigation involving Democratic prosecutors all over the United States, it should come as no surprise to anybody that all this was well planned and executed to take down Donald Trump. This is the worst abuse of the American legal system that I have ever seen. No one can remember anything like this because it never happened before. And it is a disgraceful abuse of the legal process. And I must say, watching Letitia James make her comments outside of court, all improper comments by a prosecutor, all in violation of the professional standards of the Bar of New York. And the only person who said anything about it other than Trump has been Elise Stefanik filing a complaint against the judge in the case and against Letitia James. But here's the problem. The Bar of New York itself has done absolutely nothing, and they will do nothing because the Bar of New York has become a political instrument of the Democratic Party, and it's a one-party state, and it's a dangerous place to do business. And as I have said before, and I'll say it again, if my clients ask me whether or not they should do business in New York, I say you do not. You go to Florida. Go anyplace else. Don't go to Massachusetts. Don't go to New York. Don't go to New Jersey. Don't go to California. Go to Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee. Go any place. Do not go to New York.
Will anything happen with that official bar complaint that Elise Stefanik has filed?
No.
Right.
No. The bar up there is completely compromised. They would have done something on their own if there was going to do something. They didn't need a complaint. They have the power under the rules by observation and by rules of the obvious to take action. Letitia James should have been sanctioned when she was running for office. She was a lawyer at the time. She just didn't become a lawyer when she became the state attorney general. The bar should have sanctioned her during your campaign. They chose not to do so. They allowed this. They invited this. So they're going to do nothing with Elise Stefanik's complaint.
But, Joe, here's what's really wild. Letitia James in New York, the attorney general who was the center of this outrageous, politically motivated, ridicule-worthy prosecution of Donald Trump in this civil case, is actually only the second most embarrassing public prosecutor in America after last week because of Fani Willis and her behavior in that courtroom in Fulton County. I love watching something unfold on television and think, my God, I want Joe diGenova sitting right next to me to comment on this as it goes on. What's your overall takeaway from the outlandish state of affairs in this case against Donald Trump and the way Fani Willis is conducting herself as DA of Fulton County?
Well, it was shocking. First of all, she surprised her own representatives in court by showing up in court. She walked into the courtroom and took it over. She was arrogant. She was disrespectful to the court. She demonstrated an amazing amount of hubris. She was unhinged to the point of having to be at least admonished once or twice by the judge that he was going to strike her testimony if she didn't stop arguing with the lawyers. But the truth is, when she said she wasn't on trial, she was on trial. That entire proceeding was about her judgment, and the judgment of Mr. Wade, the special counsel that she appointed. That was a disgraceful display by a public servant, but especially by a lawyer, and more especially by a prosecutor. Just like Letitia James, she's practically a carbon copy. The kind of language being used by a prosecutor was absolutely outrageous. And I'll say this about the judge. He started off on a pretty good foot. He looked like he was going to be even-handed, but then she beat him to a pulp.
Yeah.
He backed off. He let her get away with murder. Finally, when he got up once during the hearing and said, we're going to take a 5-minute break, he was worried, not about what she was going to do, but about what he was going to do. He was afraid he was going to blow up in court and say things about her that would haunt him in 4 months when he's up for re-election in a retention election in Georgia. So, it is a compromised system, and you are watching it fall apart in front of your very eyes. She really should be the subject of bar complaints and bar action, and the Georgia bar will do nothing.
But she and her paramour,
let me underscore, they won't do anything because she's black.
And she and her paramour are the only ones that they are responsible right now. They have the future of the 2024 presidential campaign in their hands. These two clowns are engineering this entire thing that could very well end up swaying the election. It's outrageous.
And, the judge has a very easy off-ramp here. The rule says a conflict or an appearance of a conflict. There is simply no doubt.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
There is an appearance of a conflict of interest after her testimony and the testimony of Wade and the testimony of his former partner, Bradley. There just is no doubt that there is an appearance. This judge doesn't have any choice. He has to find a violation, an appearance of a conflict, and basically recuse both Wade and Fani Willis from the case. He just doesn't have any choice. And if he doesn't do that, then he's a disgrace.
Joe, I'm not even going to ask you if you can stay over because we had new revelations that the CIA started spying on Trump campaign associates well before the George Papadopoulos affair and, in fact, set up the whole thing. Plus, we've got new news over the weekend over the Biden family corruption. So you're staying with us. You have no choice. It's 7:16. Let's go straight to Jamie Whitten now.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
News is brought to you by New Look Home Design. On the next Vince Coglianese show, the stories ripped from the headlines and translated into the truth. Join us 3 to 6 on WMAL.
Continuing with Joe diGenova. Joe, you and I, when I was doing afternoon drive here on WMAL all during the Trump presidency, we had frequent conversations about the role of James Comey, the FBI, James Clapper, John Brennan, and the outrageous abuse of power and abuse of the Patriot Act and FISA warrant system to spy on members of the Trump campaign. And so I really wanted you to comment on this latest story reported by Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi. There are multiple sources close to the House Intelligence Committee that says that it was Obama, as you said all along, this all starts with Obama. He was president over all this. It's Obama and John Brennan, the CIA director. They started this entire thing by asking our allies in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, England to spy on 26 members of the Trump campaign and then report back whatever they learn that then became the pretense for Operation Crossfire Hurricane. This is what we learned last week, and I'd love for you to take that ball and tell us what's next.
You will remember that shortly before the inauguration of Donald Trump, Susan Rice wrote a memorandum for the record saying that she and the president and the vice president had been briefed by John Brennan on a scheme, and that the president instructed everyone that it was to be handled by the book.
Right.
And everyone wondered, why in the world would Susan Rice, as she's walking out the door, write this memorandum? And the answer is very simple. The reporting by Matt Taibbi and others indicates that there was a plan afoot, a conspiracy to deny Donald Trump his civil rights as the incoming president of the United States. There has always been ample evidence of this. It has been fairly evident to a first-year prosecutor that actions were taken by the intelligence community, the FBI, people in the Department of Justice, and people in the White House to conspire against Donald Trump to take office. The notion that Donald Trump is somehow trying to ruin the electoral process and interfere in the election by talking about what happened to him is ludicrous. This all goes back to Barack Obama, who had the power to stop this and didn't do it. He was aware of what was going on. Susan Rice has a memo for the record establishing that. He did nothing to stop it. And John Brennan was amply involved from the beginning in ramping up this conspiracy against the president of the United States. James Comey was in there involved in all of this. So let's just all remember, this is not new news. This is confirmatory reporting. All of this was on the public record in 2000. Right after the election in 2016, this stuff started coming out and was being reported. You'll go back and you'll see New York Times stories, all kinds of stories about this being reported. But the mainstream media decided that it was just fine to interfere with the conduct of the office. And here's what I want to see. I believe that there's now more than enough public interest in this matter for a special grand jury to be convened when the new Republican president takes office, whoever it is, and start an investigation into the crimes that were committed by the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, his vice president, Joe Biden, by John Brennan, by James Clapper, by James Comey, by others who were aware of this plot, for a grand jury to be started to investigate whether or not those individuals should be indicted for denying Donald Trump his civil rights. Because here's the point. Under conspiracy law, the statute of limitations never runs out on these crimes when the people who were involved in the conspiracy continue to commit overt acts in furtherance of that conspiracy. Every time they issue a statement denying involvement, that is an overt act. When they deny that it didn't happen, that is an overt act. The statute of limitations has not run out on this. It's time for the incoming administration to do what Bill Barr did not do, and that's impanel a grand jury and start taking testimony and issuing subpoenas against all of these people. And now that the standard has been set, including the former president of the United States, because he was not acting within the outer perimeter of his authority when he authorized a criminal conspiracy against the incoming president.
Joe, and amen to that. And I want to scream it from the highest mountaintops, amen. It's almost as though the Democrats and the media know that that's coming because they've already set up this narrative that Donald Trump must be stopped because if he gets into the White House, he'll use the Justice Department and the power of the FBI to persecute and imprison his political enemies. And so if Trump were to come in and say, look at all of this that happened, we've got to get a grand jury. It's like, see, there you go. That's what he's doing. He's Stalin.
Sure, they will, and but of course that's exactly what they're doing to Donald Trump right now.
Right.
So what you cannot do is listen to them. The system will only correct itself when the Democrats understand that the process that they have set in motion will be used against them. This is a legitimate use of the power of the Justice Department, which means that Donald Trump better do what he didn't do the first time he was president, if he's lucky enough to get elected, and that's choose some good people. Yeah. By the way, there are all kinds of excellent lawyers who could become attorney general, head of the criminal division, do all sorts of things. And the first thing they need to do when they come in is reorganize the Justice Department, move people around, take people out of positions that they've been in for 10, 15, and 20 years, move them out, never fire anybody, just reorganize them into different positions. Now, we hear there's a plan underway to try and get rules passed by OMB and the Office of Personnel Management to prevent an incoming president from doing that kind of reorganization. Well, if the Republicans allow that to occur, then they will deserve exactly what they get.
Joe diGenova, thank you, sir. I was looking forward to, as you can tell, we hit a lot of different times. We didn't even get to the Biden corruption, but we covered it pretty extensively earlier in the program. Thank you, Joe.
You bet.
It's 7:24.
Guys,
Eileen Whalen.
Right now it is 26 in Chantilly, 24 in Greenbelt, 34 at Reagan National. I'm John Matthews on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36 here on this President's Day. Thanks for tuning in and being part of our celebration. Appreciate you joining us. Coming up at 8:05, Zach Smith of Heritage Foundation will talk about the judgment up in New York against President Trump and how it's going to affect the elections. Everyone's talking about, and we sort of talked about it with Joe diGenova, and I'm seeing other cable. Let's talk about the appeals process. They did the damage.
Yeah.
I don't care about the appeal. I mean, I'm sure for Mr. Trump personally, and obviously that's a big deal here. But the bigger deal is what they brazenly did to affect the election. They just did this thing, and no matter how the appeals process ends up, they can never take that back.
Yeah.
And we should never forget that. That's Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
I am Larry O'Connor. And let's try to be, trying to get zen today. I'm trying to be a little more centered and not get angry. It's a federal holiday. We're supposed to look back and honor certainly Washington and Lincoln, what we used to do, and then they turned it into, all presidents. I don't want to focus on this president. He angers me.
Yeah, me too.
Let's talk about good presidents. Jane Hampton Cook is here. She is a presidential historian. She can save this entire conversation now by telling us about the good presidents. Although Jane, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Just saw a survey done by the American Association of Political Scientists, and they ranked the presidents.
Oh, I know.
They just ranked Joe Biden 2 positions above Ronald Reagan.
I know.
This is what we get up. How
cool
can you even trust historians anymore, Jane?
But can we get excited? How cool is it that Jane has presidential historian as her title?
Right, exactly.
That's
but
very
I don't
cool.
know. I mean, when people do things like that,
That's
Jane,
true.
you probably it's like, geez, I don't want to be in that club.
Well, whenever I get a survey like that, I always go Republican as best I can on, and rank modern, certain people down really low because I know other people are ranking them really high.
Oh, I see. So you offset things there. I appreciate that.
Better-
I only get one vote. They probably get more than one vote, right? So anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So what should Americans do here? By the way, her most recent books, War of Lies, When George Washington Was the Target and Propaganda Was the Crime, and The Submarine and the Spies. Oh, I got to get that. Friendship and Vigilance in the American Revolution. what should Americans do this presidency? Because it is convoluted. It used to be very straightforward. You had Washington's birthday, you have Lincoln's birthday, and now what, we're supposed to celebrate Millard Fillmore?
Oh, that's pretty funny. After George Washington died, he died in December, and people honored his birthday in the following February. They were grieving. So really, President's Day kind of has its beginnings in this idea of honoring George Washington and remembering, all that he did and all that he sacrificed for America. And that's really what it should be. It's the sacrifice for America. He gave up, his quiet life, and he was a general. He commanded an army during a very, very difficult war that he was not expected to win, yet he won. And he was humble about it. And he didn't really want to be president, but he did it because that's what the country needed. And he gave up power. I think what we see now in our politics is power-hungry people, where there isn't this sense of humility and this sense of, I'm doing this for Americans, it's not for me. I think we see too much of me and not nearly enough of thinking about other people and who we're leading. And so I think to look this President's Day, let's think about the goodness of George Washington, the good things that he did. And I think that's helpful and a little bit healing, that it's not always been like this.
Jane, one other thing that this is sort of new to our culture is demonizing the founders, our Constitution, the American way of life, American history. So many kids today, not just K through 12, but also in higher education, as we've seen recently, have been taught that America is a terrible place, and that our founders were all, slave owners, and we should be ashamed of our American heritage. What do you think parents should do to help push back on this narrative? Obviously, a lot of parents are choosing not to send their kids to these woke schools, but let's be real. This is throughout the culture. What do you advise parents, or how do you advise parents to push back on this?
Well, I think it's looking for the truth and finding resources and things that you can show your children that do talk about those virtues and the truth. I've been writing a series that's going to come out in the summer about patriotic books for kids.
Oh, nice.
What is the American flag? What is the Pledge of Allegiance? What about My Country 'Tis of Thee and America the Beautiful? Because I noticed that there were no books in this genre on patriotism. And that, I think, focusing on those core values is something that parents can do, and talk about, the virtues of the flag. The flag has 7 virtues. Red means valor and hardiness. White means innocence and purity, and we're protecting the innocence of our children right now against this culture. Blue means justice, perseverance, and vigilance. And so those are some things. And I'm trying to write different books about the Revolution for different interests. A history mystery, which is what the War of Lies is, the Submarine and the Spies is a novel. I get that into schools and get it into part of the curriculum, because only 13% of 8th graders are proficient in American history. That was a statistic from last year. So, we have to be proactive in teaching our children these things.
Our guest is presidential historian Jane Hampton Cook. You can find information about her at janecook.com. You've worked in a White House before, and I've got to think just the nature of the job. When a president shows up to work every day, goes down those stairs, walks through the corridors of 1600 Pennsylvania, sits down at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, are presidents, based on your firsthand experience, I know they're cognizant of the fact that everything they do and everything they say is historic, but how much of that is actually taken into account when they have to make decisions? It's like, what will history say about this? And by the way, is it a good thing if it is sort of there in the back of their mind, or even in the forefront of their mind? Sometimes I would think that it could paralyze you from making a decision.
Yeah, I think that's true. If you think too much about it, I think you have to do what you think is right in what is in the context of everything that's going on. I think, some presidents look to historians to when there's not that passion and emotion attached to, like, we don't know anything about Millard Fillmore, so we can probably evaluate him objectively, right? We never voted for the man. But so that is part of their equation, but you can't live your presidency, and you can be suffocated by something like that too. And I remember when I was working in the White House with Mercedes. She and I shared an office. Mercedes Schlapp and I shared an office. Oh, how fun! Yes, and so I remember at that time there was a respect for the office. There was a concern for how how people will revere it, and I don't see that right now. I remember being asked on Fox, about the transition between Bush and Obama and how smooth it was, and now we're learning how incredibly unsmooth and corrupt the
deceitful,
to Trump. And I'm like, that's not fair. That feels like you're not giving what you got, basically. That's hard.
So, Jane, you're sharing an office with then Mercedes Viana during the George Herbert Walker Bush presidency. How often was Matt hanging around? Was he like sort of like constantly, hey, Mercedes, you want to go out for drinks afterwards? You want to do that? Or is this one of those things where he was dating you and then it didn't go well and he ended up going with Mercedes? I want the story.
Well, I was the only member of that staff in my little office who was married. So that really would have been a scandal if that had been.
Oh, all right. Forgive me for even going there. I thought you were about to say I'm the only one in the office that didn't date Matt.
No.
All right.
So anyway, we got to know Matt. He would pop up and say hello.
That's very fun. I bet he did. Well, I say that just as a preview since this is CPAC week, and so they're going to be in the news quite a bit, but that's pretty fun. Jane Hampton Cook, janecook.com. Thank you. It's always great to join to speak with you on days like this.
Thank you so much for having me.
745 WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes, first on the fives. Joy Reid has some thoughts about African American History Month. If you were starting to give some credence to the idea that we set aside a month to celebrate and get better informed on African American history, perhaps you shouldn't listen to what Joy Reid has to say because it will absolutely repel you from the idea. Here, listen.
And to find out that literally Barack Obama's 2 terms as president are your reparations, and Juneteenth, which you already celebrated anyway, is your reparations, and yet you built this country. You literally physically built this country, and yet the attitude toward you from a lot of your peers and your fellow citizens is just shut up and be grateful. And it's infuriating.
And so it is infuriating, and that was interesting. You find out that you're told to shut up, and you literally physically built this country. A cursory search of the interwebs to find out Joy Reid's long history connected to the enslavement of Africans back in the 17th century and 18th century here in the United States of America turns up an interesting discovery. Her father is from the Congo, and her mother is from Guyana. So she was born here from 2 African immigrants who voluntarily came to this systemically racist country.
Yes.
They weren't brought here on slave ships. She has literally no connection.
Right.
But she's asking for reparations because she literally physically built this country.
This is delicious, first of all. I enjoy watching this. But this is very similar to Sunny Hostin.
Yeah.
Who a couple of weeks ago, she was on that PBS show, Tracing Your Roots Back, and found that she is from a family of slave owners.
Yeah. But she demands reparations.
Yes. So, these people should just be careful with what they say and want. Because
there's no repercussions. Are you kidding me?
That's true. Good point.
Joy Reid has a primetime television show on MSNBC, and she's held up as an intellectual champion.
Silly me. You're right.
Even though she spent most of her earlier life with homophobic rants against transgender individuals and gay people that would get me thrown in Media Matters jail.
That's right.
Just
memory hold.
Yeah. So why should she be careful? Are you kidding? There's no. And by the way, the fact that she and Sunny Hostin don't suffer any repercussions because of that's also another form of racism.
That's right.
Because there's a different standard set for them. Because the white people in charge, the white liberals in charge, the tolerant ones actually have lower standards for black hosts on television shows because they don't think they're capable of doing anything better.
That's right.
Because they're racist. Happy Black History Month. 7:53.